The Charles de Gaulle airport buzzed with the particular energy of a Tuesday morning. Business travelers rushing toward gates, families clutching boarding passes, lovers stealing final kisses before departures. Among the crowd moved Alice Moreau, her heels clicking against the marble floor in a rhythm that matched the pace of her thoughts. At 40, she carried herself with the kind of composed elegance that came from years of navigating the ruthless world of Parisian fashion journalism. Her dark hair was pulled into a severe bun, her makeup flawless but understated, and her navy blazer whispered quiet authority to anyone who looked her way. She had spent 8 years at Elon magazine, 8 years of sacrificing weekends, holidays, and any semblance of a personal life at the altar of her career. Her colleagues described her as brilliant but cold, talented but impossible. They whispered behind her back that she had the emotional range of a glacier and the social skills of a cactus. Alice knew this, of course. She had learned long ago that excellence demanded isolation, that reaching the top meant walking a lonely path. But the loneliness had a weight now that it hadn't carried in her younger years. Her divorce 3 years ago had left her not just single but untethered, navigating the complicated terrain of co-parenting, while maintaining a career that demanded everything she had. Her daughter, Sophie, lived with her most of the time, but Alice felt like a ghost in her own home, present physically, absent emotionally, forever calculating the hours until she had to return to the office. Each morning followed the same exhausted ritual. Alice would wake before dawn, prepare Sophie's school bag, and then drive through the gray Paris morning to drop her daughter at her sister's house. Claire, 5 years younger and infinitely more patient, had never understood Alice's devotion to work. "She's growing up without you," Claire would say, her voice gentle but pointed. "You can't get these years back, Alice." Alice would always respond the same way. A tight smile, a murmured thanks, and a retreat back into her car. The guilt sat in her chest like a stone, but she didn't know how to be anyone other than who she had become. Ambition had hollowed out the softer parts of her, and now she was left with a woman who knew exactly what she wanted, but had forgotten how to want anything for herself. The flight to Sao Paulo had been routine. A quick business trip to interview a rising Brazilian designer whose minimalist aesthetic was causing ripples in the fashion world. Alice had conducted the interview efficiently, gathered enough material for a compelling cover story, and boarded her return flight exhausted but satisfied. She had earned a window seat in business class, and from the moment she sat down, she opened her laptop, determined to use the 11-hour flight to transform her notes into a draft. The young man who appeared at her row surprised her. He was perhaps 20, with the kind of open, eager face that belonged to someone who hadn't yet learned to guard against disappointment. He glanced at his boarding pass, then at the overhead compartment, confusion flickering across his features. "Excuse me," he said, his French accent suggesting he was perhaps not French at all. "I think there might be a mistake with my seat." Alice barely looked up. "You should speak to a flight attendant." He did, and moments later, a harried flight attendant appeared, checking boarding passes and murmuring apologies. There had indeed been a seating issue. His economy ticket had been overbooked, and business class had space. The young man settled into the seat beside Alice, his excitement barely contained. He ran his fingers over the leather armrest, examined the entertainment screen with the wonder of a child visiting a theme park, and kept casting glances at the champagne cart. Alice found him endearing in the way one finds a puppy endearing, amusing but ultimately irrelevant to her purposes. She returned to her work, her fingers dancing across the keyboard, as she crafted the opening paragraphs of her article. The designer had spoken about finding beauty in absence, about the power of what remained unsaid. Alice wrote about silence as the ultimate accessory, about the elegance of restraint. The turbulence hit without warning. One moment the plane was gliding smoothly through clear skies. The next, it shuddered like a frightened animal. The seatbelt sign pinged on, but it was too late. The aircraft dropped and Alice's laptop slammed against the tray table as cups of coffee scattered across the floor. Claire had told her once that the universe gave you exactly what you needed in moments of crisis, that fear revealed your truest self. In that moment, as the plane plunged and the cabin filled with screams, Alice discovered something about herself that she had spent years concealing. She grabbed the young man's hand. It happened instinctively, without thought or intention. Her fingers threaded through his, clinging with a desperation that shocked them both. He was warm and solid, and in that impossible moment of suspended terror, he became her anchor, her only point of connection to a world that seemed to be falling apart beneath them. The turbulence lasted less than 3 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. When the plane finally stabilized, when the pilot's calm voice announced that they had passed through the rough patch, Alice became aware of her hand still wrapped around his. She released it slowly, her cheeks flushing despite herself. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The young man, Adam, as she would later learn his name was, looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "It's all right," he said softly. "I understand." Alice gathered her things with shaking hands, unable to meet his eyes. When the plane landed at Charles de Gaulle, she gathered her carry-on and walked briskly toward the jet bridge, desperate to escape the intimacy of the moment. She had a magazine to run, a daughter to collect, a life to maintain. She could not afford to be the kind of woman who held hands with strangers during turbulence. "Wait," Adam called out behind her. "Your pen drive."
Alice tottet her bag absently.
It was there where it should be. She turned, confused, and saw Adam holding up a small device that must have fallen from her bag during the chaos of the turbulence. "It must have dropped when," he began. But Alice was already walking away, her composure reasserting itself. "Thank you," she said over her shoulder. "Keep it." She didn't stop to see his reaction. She never looked back as she walked through the airport, collected her luggage, and found Claire waiting in the arrivals hall with Sophie, who ran into her arms with the uncomplicated joy of a 7-year-old who had missed her mother. "Who was that young man you were talking to?" Claire asked, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "No one," Alice said. "A misunderstanding." But as she buckled Sophie into the car seat, she realized her hands were still trembling. The weeks that followed were consumed by the familiar rhythm of Alice's life, a cadence measured in deadlines and disappointments. Elan magazine occupied a peculiar position in the landscape of French fashion publications. It was respected but not revolutionary, influential but not cutting edge. Alice had spent years trying to push it toward something bolder, something that would cement its legacy, but she kept meeting the same invisible wall. Her editor-in-chief, Jean-Philippe, was a kind man but a cautious one. He had promoted Alice to her current position 6 years ago, and then seemed to forget that she existed. Every year, she requested a meeting to discuss her future with the magazine. Every year, he smiled paternally, praised her dedication, and explained that the timing wasn't quite right. For years of this silence had transformed her frustration into something harder, something that sat in her chest like a splinter that refused to work its way out. The morning after her return from Brazil, Alice walked into the office to find her colleagues already assembled around the coffee machine, their voices low with the particular conspiracy of office gossip. She recognized the looks they exchanged when they saw her, the quick dart of eyes, the meaningful silence. She had become accustomed to it over the years, the way people either wanted to be her or wanted to see her fall. Her desk was a monument to organized chaos. Piles of fashion magazines, printouts of potential stories, a tablet displaying the latest social media trends. She sat down, opened her laptop, and began the daily ritual of catching up on emails. There was nothing unusual about her inbox, until she noticed a missed call notification from reception. "A young man called for you," the receptionist had written. Wouldn't leave a name. Said it was urgent. Alice frowned. She had no reason to believe this was connected to the flight, to the pen drive she had callously abandoned. She had told herself that the device contained nothing sensitive, just preliminary notes for the Brazil article, some contacts, a few personal photographs. Losing it had been careless but not catastrophic. She had already replaced it with a new drive and continued with her life. She deleted the message and turned her attention to the week's real problem. The editorial meeting scheduled for 10 o'clock. Jean-Philippe had hinted that he wanted to discuss the magazine's direction, and Alice had spent the past week preparing a comprehensive proposal for refreshing their approach. She believed, with the particular conviction of the ambitious, that she had exactly what Elon needed. The meeting room smelled of coffee and expensive perfume. Alice sat at the far end of the table, watching Jean-Philippe shuffle through papers with the unhurried manner of a man who had never been late for anything in his life. Around her, her colleagues exchanged glances, their faces carefully neutral. Alice, Jean-Philippe said, looking up with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I've been going through your proposal. It's certainly ambitious. Alice felt a flicker of hope. I believe we need to take risks if we want to stay relevant. The fashion industry is evolving. We need to evolve with it. Jean-Philippe tapped his pen against the table. The board has concerns. Your articles, Alice, they're technically excellent, of course, but they lack a certain vitality. Our readers want excitement. They want to feel something. And frankly, your work has become predictable. The word landed like a slap. Alice felt her face flush, but she kept her expression carefully controlled. Predictable isn't necessarily bad. Consistency builds trust with readers. Perhaps. But it doesn't sell magazines. Jean-Philippe shuffled his papers again. I'm going to be frank with you, Alice. Your position here isn't as secure as you might think. We've received interest from some younger writers, people with fresh perspectives. If you want to remain with Elon, you're going to need to show us something we haven't seen before. The meeting continued for another hour, discussing other articles and upcoming features, but Alice barely heard any of it. Her mind was trapped on a loop. Not secure, not secure, not secure. She had sacrificed everything for this magazine. And now they were telling her it wasn't enough. The unfairness of it was almost suffocating. That night, she stayed at the office long after everyone else had left. The building was quiet, the city lights glowing through the windows like scattered diamonds. She sat at her desk, staring at her laptop screen, searching for the inspiration that seemed to have abandoned her. It was nearly midnight when she found the note from reception. Someone had left it on her desk, a small sticky paper with the message. Young man called again. Said you lost something on the plane. The pen drive. Alice's heart seized. She had forgotten about it entirely, had convinced herself it didn't matter. But suddenly she remembered what was actually on that drive. Not just work notes but photographs of Sophie, private documents, contacts she couldn't afford to lose. She had been careless, impossibly careless, and now someone had found it. She called the number reception had provided, her heart pounding against her ribs. It rang 3 times before a voice answered. A young voice, male, with a particular note of surprise that suggested he hadn't expected her to call. Hello.
Adam.
She remembered his face suddenly, the way he had looked at her after the turbulence, the strange intensity in his eyes. Yeah. You finally called. I need my pen drive. It's important. There was a pause. She could hear music and laughter in the background, the particular din of a crowded bar. I'm at a place called Le Miroir. You can come get it. Alice looked at the clock. Nearly 1 in the morning. She should go home. Should be getting ready for Sophie's school day, should be sleeping. But the pen drive was a thread she couldn't leave dangling. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Le Miroir was a narrow bar in the Marais, the kind of place that existed primarily for people who had given up on sleeping at a reasonable hour. Alice pushed through the door and was hit by a wall of smoke, loud music, and the particular energy of young people who still believed the night would last forever. She spotted Adam immediately. He was sitting at a corner table with a group of friends, his easy laughter drawing attention from the women nearby. He looked different from the nervous young man on the plane. More confident, more in his element. When he saw Alice, his face lit up with a smile that made something in her chest tighten uncomfortably. You came, he said, standing to meet her. I wasn't sure you would. You have something that belongs to me. His friends were watching them with the particular interest of people who had just witnessed something intriguing. Alice recognized 2 of them suddenly, colleagues from her own magazine, women she had briefly nodded to in the hallway, but never really spoken to. Their expressions ranged from shock to barely concealed delight. Alice Moreau, one of them said, her voice carrying across the table. I didn't know you had friends outside the office. This isn't a social visit, Alice said stiffly. She turned back to Adam. The pen drive. Please. Adam's smile flickered. It's at my apartment. I can take you there. Now. Why not? It's still early. Alice should have refused. She should have demanded he bring it to her, should have suggested a meeting during daylight hours in a public place. But exhaustion and frustration had eroded her usual caution. She found herself following Adam out of the bar, into the cool Paris night, toward a motorcycle parked on the street. "I've never done this before," she said, staring at the vehicle with something approaching alarm. "Done what?"
Ride na scooter.
"Anything like this." Adam laughed. A warm, genuine sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep. He handed her a helmet, his fingers brushing against hers in a gesture that felt almost deliberate. "Hold on tight," he said, "and try not to think about the ground." The ride through the sleeping city was intoxicating. Alice clung to Adam's waist, the wind whipping against her face, the lights of Paris blurring into streaks of gold and silver. For a few minutes she wasn't Alice Moreau, the controlled and cautious editor. She was just a woman on a motorcycle with a young man she barely knew, doing something wild and reckless and utterly unlike herself. Adam's apartment was small but comfortable, cluttered with books and records and the particular chaos of someone who hadn't yet learned to fear mess. His father, it emerged, lived with him, a gentle-looking man who raised an eyebrow at Alice's appearance but said nothing, retreating to his bedroom with the tact of someone who understood that young people needed privacy. Adam made tea. They sat across from each other at a small kitchen table, and for a moment, neither spoke. Alice became aware of how strange this situation was, how thoroughly it violated every rule she had made for herself. "The pen drive," she said finally. "In a minute." Adam leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "I've been thinking about you since the plane. That moment during the turbulence. You grabbed my hand. It was a reflex. I was frightened. People don't grab my hand when they're frightened. They grab whatever's closest. You reached for me specifically." He paused. "There's a difference." Alice didn't know how to respond. The air between them felt charged, electric with something she was afraid to name. "I'm not asking for anything," Adam continued. "I just wanted to see you again. And now you're here." She took the pen drive when he finally gave it to her, but something had shifted. The urgency was gone, replaced by a strange reluctance to leave. When Adam offered to drive her home, she refused. She would take a cab, she said, it was no trouble. But as she stood in his doorway, his helmet still in her hand, she felt the pull of something she couldn't quite articulate. "Could we get coffee sometime?" Adam asked. "Just coffee. Nothing strange." Alice smiled, the real kind that crinkled her eyes and softened the lines around her mouth. "Thank you for returning this," she said.
Gut nicht, Adam.
She didn't answer his question. She wasn't sure she knew how. The photograph appeared on social media the next morning, spreading with the particular virulence of something scandalous and delicious. Alice first learned about it when she walked into the office and found her colleagues huddled around screens, their voices low with the particular frisson of gossip about to become fact. "Alice," one of them said, turning with a grin that made her stomach clench, "you're trending." She looked at the screen and felt the blood drain from her face. The photograph had been taken from an angle that told a story entirely of its own making. In the dim light outside Adam's apartment building, with the motorcycle parked behind them and the street lamp casting them both in soft shadow, it looked for all the world like a kiss. Adam's face was tilted toward hers. Her hand was raised to his cheek. The image was grainy, poorly lit, and utterly damning. "Where did this come from?" she demanded. "Someone posted it on Instagram. It's already been shared 100 times." Alice grabbed her phone and searched for the image. Within minutes she had found the original post. A private account with few followers, but the damage was already done. Her name was being mentioned, guessed at, attached to speculation about her personal life. The comments were a mixture of admiration and condemnation, some people praising her for dating a younger man, others calling her desperate and pathetic. She spent the next hour in damage control, calling the person who had posted the image, demanding they take it down. But photographs have a way of living beyond their creator's intentions, and by noon, the story had been picked up by several fashion blogs. By afternoon, Jean-Philippe had called her into his office. "I have to admit," he said, leaning back in his chair with an expression of genuine surprise, "this isn't what I expected from you, Alice. It isn't what it looks like." "Does it matter what it looks like?" Jean-Philippe smiled for the first time in months. "Do you know how many people have visited our website today? Do you know how many mentions we've had on social media? This is exactly the kind of attention we've been trying to generate for years. Alice stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. You're not concerned about the implications? About what this says about the magazine? Alice, the fashion industry has always been about youth, about reinvention, about pushing boundaries. If you're involved with a younger man, if you're seen as someone who embraces life, who takes risks, then you're exactly the kind of editor our readers want to follow. This is ridiculous. It's brilliant. Jean-Philippe leaned forward, his eyes bright with a calculating light. I want you to continue this relationship. Not for personal reasons, obviously. For the magazine. Our readership is aging, Alice. We need to signal that we're relevant, that we understand what young people care about. You can help us do that. Alice wanted to refuse. Every instinct she had screamed at her to walk away, to reclaim her privacy, to put an end to this absurd situation. But she thought of her desk, her articles, her 4 years of waiting for a promotion that never came. She thought of Sophie, growing up in the shadow of her mother's ambition. She thought of everything she had sacrificed and how little it had gotten her. All right, she heard herself say. I'll do it. The weeks that followed were a careful performance, a dance between authenticity and artifice. Alice met Adam again, this time by choice, and she brought her full attention to the encounter. She dressed differently, still elegant, but with touches of youth she had never allowed herself. She laughed more easily, asked more questions, listened with genuine interest to his stories about college and his dreams of becoming a photographer. Adam was enchanted. He didn't know about the photograph, about the strategy behind her sudden attention. All he knew was that the woman from the plane had come back, had chosen him, had looked at him with eyes that seemed to see something worth loving. They went to parties together, events where Alice made sure they were seen. She took him to a friend's art opening, deliberately making their relationship visible to the photographers gathered at the entrance. When a well-known art dealer made an inappropriate comment about her, something about older women knowing what they wanted, Adam responded with a sharp wit that made Alice laugh out loud, and she watched the dealer's face redden with humiliation. I've never done anything like this before, Adam admitted one night, as they walked along the Seine in the purple light of early evening. I never imagined meeting someone like you. Someone like me? Someone who knows what she wants. Someone who doesn't apologize for taking up space. Alice felt something twist in her chest. The conversation had strayed too close to truth, to the complicated reality beneath her careful performance. We all have our reasons for being who we are, she said carefully. Adam stopped walking. They were standing on a bridge, the city lights reflecting in the dark water below. I know about your divorce, he said. I know about Sophie. I know that people will say things about us, that society doesn't always approve. But I don't care about any of that. You should, Alice said softly. You should care. Why? What's the worst that could happen? The worst, Alice thought, was that she would hurt him, that she was already hurting him, that every moment of their time together was contaminated by the secret knowledge of her intentions. She had come to him as a strategy, as a means to an end, and now she didn't know how to tell the truth without losing everything she had gained. We need time, she said finally, to understand each other. Adam nodded slowly. I can give you time. I can give you anything you want. The phone rang before Alice could respond. It was Claire, and her voice was tight with an urgency that cut through Alice's reverie. Sophie has a fever, Claire said. I've called the doctor, but she keeps asking for you. Alice felt the familiar guilt flooding through her. She had missed another dinner, another bedtime, another moment of her daughter's life. I'm coming, she said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She turned to Adam, already calculating the fastest route to Claire's apartment. I'm sorry. Something's happened with my daughter. Adam's face was immediately concerned. Is she all right? Do you want me to come with you? No. The word came out too quickly, too firmly. Alice saw him flinch and softened her tone. I'll call you tomorrow. I promise. She hailed a cab and spent the drive wrestling with the familiar contradiction. She was using Adam, she knew that now with terrible clarity. She was using him for professional gain, for social currency, for the promotion she had wanted for so long. But the worst part, the part that kept her awake at night, was that she had started to care about him. His smile, his enthusiasm, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. She had not meant to care, and now she didn't know how to stop. The dinner with the doctor was Claire's idea. Another attempt to push Alice back into the conventional life she had abandoned. Alice agreed to come, not because she was interested but because she had learned that resistance only made Claire more persistent. She dressed carefully, elegant but not too elegant, interested but not too interested, and presented herself at Claire's apartment with an expression of polite attention. The doctor was precisely what Claire had described. Successful, well-mannered, desperate to find a wife who would tolerate his long hours and emotional unavailability. He talked about his practice for 20 minutes, then asked Alice about her work with the casual condescension of a man who believed fashion journalism was a hobby rather than a career. "So you write about clothes," he said, swirling his wine. "How fascinating." "I write about culture," Alice corrected. "About the way we present ourselves to the world. About the stories we tell through what we choose to wear." "Of course." He smiled patronizingly. "And do you find that fulfilling?" Alice thought about her life, the years of work, the sacrifices, the promotions she had been denied. She thought about Adam, about the way he looked at her, about the photograph that had somehow transformed her from a cold professional into a fascinating figure. She thought about the lie she was living and how exhausting it had become. "No," she said finally. "I find it exhausting." The dinner ended early. The doctor left with a polite but firm goodbye, and Claire turned on Alice with an expression of frustrated bewilderment. "Why do you do that?" she demanded. "Why do you ruin everything? I'm not interested in remarriage." "Why? Because of him? The boy from the photograph?" Alice flinched. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" Claire's voice softened. "Alice, I'm worried about you. You're chasing something that isn't real, and you're going to end up hurt. Or worse, you're going to hurt someone else." Alice had no answer. She stayed for another hour, playing with Sophie while Claire watched her with troubled eyes. And then she went home to an empty apartment and a bed that felt too large for one person. The fashion show was the following week, a major event that Elon was covering extensively. Alice arrived with Adam, deliberately making their entrance at the precise moment when the photographers were most active. The flashes blinded her momentarily, and she felt Adam's hand tighten on her waist as they navigated the gauntlet of cameras. The show was stunning, a celebration of bold colors and experimental silhouettes. Alice watched with professional interest, cataloging looks for potential coverage, noting which designers were taking risks and which were playing it safe. Beside her, Adam watched with the genuine appreciation of someone who had never been trained to analyze, but who understood instinctively what was beautiful. When the models stumbled on the runway, a young woman in an impossibly tall pair of heels, Adam was on his feet before anyone else, rushing to help her regain her balance. The audience gasped, then applauded, and Alice watched the CEO of Elon lean forward with sudden interest. "Who is that young man?" he asked Alice. "My friend," Alice said, the word feeling inadequate. "He has an interesting face. Photogenic. We should consider him for a shoot." The after-party was held in a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and fairy lights. Alice drank more than she should have, the champagne loosening the constraints she had placed on herself. Adam danced with her in the middle of the room, their bodies moving together in a way that felt startlingly intimate, and for a moment she forgot why she was there, forgot the strategy and the calculation, and simply existed in the sensation of being held by someone who wanted her. People were watching. She could feel their eyes, hear their whispers. The photograph had made them famous or at least infamous, and every glance felt like an evaluation. Alice pulled Adam away from the dance floor, her heart pounding with something that wasn't entirely fear. "Take me home," she said. They rode through the city in silence, the motorcycle weaving through traffic with the particular freedom of late-night streets. Adam's apartment was closer, and Alice found herself following him up the stairs, into his room, into a moment that had been building since the turbulence on the plane. She didn't plan to stay the night. She had every intention of leaving afterward, of returning to her carefully controlled life and the daughter who would soon be waking. But when morning came, when the gray light filtered through the curtains and she saw Adam sleeping beside her, the weight of what she had done settled into her chest like a stone. She had slept with him. Not as a strategy, not as a calculation, but because she wanted to. And now she didn't know how to face the consequences. The weeks that followed were strange and wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. Alice found herself thinking about Adam at unexpected moments, during meetings, while cooking dinner, in the quiet hours before sleep. His smile, his laugh, the way he said her name like it was something precious. She had not expected this, had not planned for it, and now she was drowning in feelings she didn't know how to navigate. Claire noticed the change first. "You seem different," she said one morning, as Alice dropped Sophie off for school. "Happier. Lighter." "I'm busy. That's all." "You're not just busy. You're glowing." Claire studied her sister's face with the particular attention of someone who had known her for decades. "Is it the boy? The one from the photograph?" Alice hesitated. "His name is Adam. And what exactly is he to you?" The question hung in the air, demanding an answer that Alice didn't have. What was Adam to her? A colleague? A conquest? A genuine possibility? She had used him so thoroughly, had approached him with such calculated intentions, that she no longer knew where the strategy ended and the feeling began. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know what he is to me." The dinner with Adam's father was another milestone, another step into territory that felt increasingly real. Jacques was exactly like his son, gentle, curious, unburdened by the social expectations that seemed to suffocate Alice's world. He asked her about her work, about Sophie, about her life in Paris, with a genuine interest that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't experienced in years. "Adam talks about you constantly," Jacques said, as they sat on the small balcony overlooking the street. "He thinks you're remarkable." "He's young," Alice said. "He doesn't know what he's getting into." Perhaps. Or perhaps he knows exactly what he wants, and he's brave enough to go after it. Jacques smiled. "My wife and I had 42 years together. People said similar things about us. Age difference, different backgrounds, impossible odds. None of it mattered. What mattered was that we chose each other, every single day, for 42 years. Alice felt her eyes sting with unexpected tears. She had been married once, to a man who had promised her everything and delivered nothing. She had learned to distrust promises, to expect betrayal, to keep her heart armored against disappointment. But sitting on this balcony, listening to Jacques speak about lasting love, she felt something crack open inside her. Adam proposed 3 months into their relationship. It was not the kind of proposal that happened in restaurants or on beaches, with witnesses and photographs and carefully planned speeches. It happened in his apartment on an ordinary Tuesday night, with Sophie at Claire's house and the city humming its familiar song outside the window. "I know it's fast," Adam said, his voice shaking slightly. "I know we come from different worlds and people will say things, and there are complications I don't fully understand. But I love you, Alice. I love you in a way that surprises me, that makes me want to be better than I am. I want to spend my life with you. I want to be Sophie's father if you'll let me. I want all of it, the hard parts and the easy parts, everything." Alice looked at him, this young man who had appeared on her flight by chance, who had returned her pen drive, who had followed her into a relationship built on a foundation of lies. He deserved better than her. He deserved someone who had chosen him freely, without calculation, without the weight of ambition pressing down on every interaction. "I can't," she said, the words tearing something inside her as she spoke them. "It isn't possible." "Why?" "Because of everything you're not considering. The age difference for one. The way people will look at you, judge you, wonder what a young man like you could possibly want with a woman my age. My daughter, my career, my life. I can't drag you into all of that. You wouldn't be dragging me. I'd be choosing you. It's not that simple." "Then make it simple." Adam's voice was raw now, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Stop overthinking, stop planning, stop calculating. Just tell me how you feel." Alice opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She loved him. She knew that now, had known it for weeks, had been avoiding the knowledge because it terrified her more than anything had ever terrified her before. But love wasn't enough. Love couldn't solve the practical problems, couldn't silence the critics, couldn't give Adam the normal life he deserved. "I can't," she said again, and this time she turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the middle of the room with a ring in his hand and hope in his eyes. The CEO's offer came a week later, presented with the particular enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered a new product to sell. Adam would be the face of Elon's spring campaign. A young, fresh face to signal the magazine's commitment to youth and relevance. It was, according to the CEO, the perfect solution to everyone's problems. Alice was assigned to coordinate the shoot. She told herself it was professional, that she could separate her personal feelings from her professional responsibilities. But when she arrived at the studio on the day of the shoot, when she saw Adam standing in front of the cameras with that same openness she had first noticed on the plane, she felt something inside her shatter. He knew about the photograph now. He knew about the strategy, about the calculated relationship, about every lie she had told him in the name of ambition. His friend had told him, had revealed the truth in a moment of drunken confession, and Adam had spent the past week processing the knowledge that he had been used. "You came," he said when he saw her. His voice was flat, emptied of the warmth she had grown to crave. "I didn't know if you would. I almost didn't." He met her eyes and she saw the hurt there, the confusion, the anger that he was trying so hard to contain. "But I wanted to see you. I wanted to hear you say it was a lie. Adam, tell me it wasn't real. Tell me everything was a manipulation, that you never cared about me at all." Alice opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She had used him, yes. She had approached him with calculations and strategies and professional goals. But somewhere along the way, the calculation had become genuine, the strategy had become feeling, and now she didn't know how to separate what she had done from what she had come to feel. "I cared about you," she said finally. "I never meant to, but I did." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." The photo shoot was agonizing. They moved around each other like strangers, both of them performing for the cameras while dying inside. The photographer kept asking for more connection, more chemistry, more of the spark that had made their photograph go viral. But the spark had been built on a lie, and now there was nothing left but ashes. Afterward, in the makeup room, Adam's friend, the one who had told him the truth, cornered Alice with an expression of barely contained fury. "You used him," she said. "He was just a tool for your career." "I know. Do you know what you did to him? He talked about you constantly. He thought you were different. He thought you had chosen him." Alice had no defense. She stood there, accepting the accusations, knowing that every word was deserved. She had made a choice, and now she was living with the consequences. The shoot ended and Alice gathered her things to leave. She had been fired, of course. Jean-Philippe had called her into his office the moment the truth came out, had spoken to her with the particular disappointment of someone who had believed in her and been proven wrong. She was no longer an editor at Elon. She had lost her career for a man who might never forgive her. But as she walked toward the exit, Adam called her name. "Wait." She turned, her heart pounding against her ribs. He was standing at the far end of the studio, surrounded by lights and cables and the detritus of a professional production. The other people in the room were watching them, sensing that something dramatic was about to happen. "I still don't understand," he said, walking toward her. "I don't understand how you could use me like that. Or why I still want you even knowing what you did. Adam, let me finish." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the hurt in his eyes, distant enough that she couldn't reach out to touch him. "I've been thinking about this for a week. I've been angry and confused and heartbroken. And I kept asking myself why I couldn't just let you go. And I think I know the answer." "What is it?" "Because you're the first person who ever made me feel like I mattered. On that plane when you grabbed my hand, it wasn't about the turbulence. It was about you choosing me even for a second when you could have grabbed onto anything else. And I've been trying to recapture that feeling ever since." Alice felt tears streaming down her face, though she hadn't realized she was crying. "I don't deserve you." "No, you don't. But that doesn't change how I feel." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the particular shade of his eyes in the studio lighting. "I need you to be honest with me now. Completely honest. Was any of it real? The time we spent together, the way you looked at me, the night we spent together, was any of it real? Or was I just a stepping stone?" Alice took a deep breath. The lie had been easier than the truth, but she owed him the truth. She owed him honesty, if nothing else. It became real, she said. I came to you for professional reasons, and I told myself that was all it would ever be. But you surprised me. You made me feel young and alive and seen in ways I hadn't felt in years. I fell in love with you, Adam. I never meant to, but I did. He was silent for a long moment, processing her words. Around them, the studio had gone quiet, everyone watching this unscripted drama unfold. You hurt me, he said finally. I know. I might never fully trust you again. I know that too. But I love you. His voice broke on the words. And I think I might be able to forgive you. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. If you prove to me that you've changed. If you show me that you're willing to be honest, even when it's hard. Alice reached out and took his hand, the same hand she had grabbed during the turbulence, the hand that had anchored her when she was falling. I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you, she said. If you'll let me. The college campus was different from anywhere Alice had spent time. The particular energy of young people who still believed that the world was waiting for them to reshape it. She had never visited Adam here, had never seen him in the context of his classes and friends and the life he had built before she entered it. She found him sitting on a bench near the main quad, a notebook open in his lap, his face troubled in a way that suggested he was thinking about things he would rather not think about. When he saw her, he closed the notebook and looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I wasn't expecting you, he said. I know. Alice sat down beside him, suddenly aware of the strange looks they were getting. A young man and an older woman, clearly not teacher and student, clearly something more complicated. I needed to see you. I needed to say something that I should have said a long time ago. Adam said nothing, waiting. I spent years building a career, Alice began. I told myself that success mattered, that ambition was noble, that everything I sacrificed would be worth it in the end. And I realized last week that I was wrong. I was so focused on what I wanted to become that I forgot who I was becoming. Alice. Let me finish. Please. She took a breath, steadying herself. I used you. I treated you like a tool, like a means to an end, and I told myself it was justified because I was chasing something important. But nothing is more important than honesty. Nothing matters more than the way we treat the people who love us. And you're telling me this because? Because I choose you. She turned to face him fully, holding his gaze with the directness she had always brought to her professional negotiations. I choose you, Adam. Not the strategy, not the magazine, not what you can do for my career. You. The person who returned my pen drive and made me feel like I was worth knowing. The person who saw through my defenses and refused to give up. I choose you, and I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they had been through and everything that still lay ahead. Then Adam smiled. The real smile, the one she had been afraid she would never see again, and reached out to take her hand. I told you I might be able to forgive you, he said. I think I've already started. You shouldn't forgive me that easily. Who said anything about easy? I'm just saying I'm willing to try. He squeezed her hand. But you have to promise me something. What? Promise me that you'll never lie to me again. Even when the truth is hard. Even when it might cost you something. I need to know that when you say you love me, you really mean it. Alice thought about all the lies she had told, to Adam, to herself, to everyone who had believed in her. She thought about the woman she had been and the woman she was trying to become. It wouldn't be easy, this path toward honesty. It would require her to be vulnerable in ways she had spent 40 years avoiding. I promise, she said. No more lies. Only the truth, even when it's difficult. Adam leaned over and kissed her, softly, gently. The way you kiss someone you have chosen to trust despite every reason not to. Around them, the campus hummed with its familiar energy, and Alice felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. They sat together on that bench for a long time, talking about nothing and everything, planning a future that was uncertain but real. Alice thought about Sophie, about how she would explain this complicated love to her daughter. She thought about her career, about finding a new path that didn't require deception. She thought about Jacques, about the 42 years of love he had shared with his wife, and wondered if she and Adam might have something like that. It was too early to know. They were still learning each other, still healing from the wounds they had inflicted. But for the first time in her life, Alice felt like she was choosing correctly. Not for ambition, not for status, not for any of the things she had spent decades chasing. Just for love, simple and complicated and worth every risk. Outside the campus, the Paris afternoon stretched before them, full of possibility. Adam stood and offered her his hand, and Alice took it without hesitation. "Where do you want to go?" he asked. "Anywhere," she said. "As long as it's with you." They walked together toward the gates, two people who had found each other by chance and chosen each other by will, stepping into a future that was finally, irrevocably their own.